Hello, this is Chuck Hogan with Your Best Life, and welcome to the Spanglish World Network on TV channel 9, 250, and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. The app is completely free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016. Well, I don't know what is. And thank you all for joining us today on YBL. You know, every now and then, some amazing with people are, I'll say, altering the world in the most beautiful way. And tonight, there is no exception. Libby is one of those folks. She is a celebrity media along with an astrologer. And if that wasn't to boot, she's one of the nicest people I've met in a long time. And we've had some amazing conversations. Welcome, Iris, to the show tonight. So grateful to have you here and to have this opportunity to learn more about astrology and you and your journey. And I'm just going to ask, why astrology? What got you so involved in this beautiful mystic art, if you will?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show today, Chuck. And I've really enjoyed you talking to you and our conversations. Well, you're going to laugh when I tell you. In the 80s, I was dating someone who could walk into any bar and guess their sun sign. And I'm kind of competitive, actually very competitive. And I'm like, how did you do that? And they're like, I read this book. So I read the book and I still couldn't guess people's sun signs. So I'm like, there's got to be a method to this. So I started taking classes so that I could do this bar trick, basically, of walking into any bar and guessing your sun sign. So I got very interested and very involved, and it explained a lot of things in life and in my life. But I want to say something. Years later, after classes, I decided I got all these friends together, like 15 of us, and we were taking classes every other week from this teacher who would come in from Connecticut, who's quite good. And we went into a bar one night, and I'm like, okay, let's see if this works. So I tried to guess someone's sun sign, and I'm like, So I'm like, what's your birthday? And I look it up. There's a book called An Ephemeris, which has, all the coordinates in for all the stars and where they are and where the planets are at any given moment. And I realized I was connecting to people emotionally, and I was guessing their moon signs. So we tested it out. It must have been about, 7 or 8 years later, where I just kept walking up to people and asking them I'd say, I feel like your moon is X. And they look at me either, I don't know, or yes. And so basically, yeah. So I still can't guess someone's sun signs, I want to say. But that's what got me into astrology.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And isn't it interesting where life takes us? I know that you had a very esteemed career in corporate America with some very noteworthy folks and organizations. And yet you made a comment earlier today that really struck a chord with me. And I want to thank you for this. And that is that you've never been happier, that living the life that you lead now. And some people might think that prosperity and money are the largest motivating factors that really help create, if we want to call it compensation or a value proposition or compelling future. And just to see you light up when you were like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And it's in helping support people with understanding how this, and I say mystic, but it really, there's a lot of science behind this as well. There's a lot of, I'll just say, faith and belief. Astrology, I actually look at, and it's like I've always been a very spiritual person. And I started looking at it going, why are so many people dying of energetic thirst when they're swimming in a sea of energy? And really, when we start talking about astrology and your biochemical makeup, this can really be attributed to when you were born, when your spark was lit, when you came to the universe, when this all became a part of who you are and what you are. And I was like, wow, that's beautiful. That's
Mm.
really amazing. When you describe astrology to folks, what would you say to someone who's a brand newbie who is looking to find some compass, if you will, some direction as to what this means in the everyday person's life?
Mhm. So that's a really good question. So basically, if someone wanted to go for a reading or wanted to know if they should go for a reading, I would tell them, and I've said this before, is that astrology is driving at night with the lights on. It
Yes.
helps you see the road. And planets must express themselves. In other words, we are all made up of minerals and water, and so are the planets. And when you look at a planet like the moon, we're about to have a full moon. People are getting a little crazy. It's a full moon in Sag, so they're even getting crazier. And our blood pressure goes up, the seas go up. A lot of surgeons won't even operate on full moons because they know the power of it. All planets have that power, although we don't feel it as strongly because they're not as close as the moon. But planets need to express themselves. And I always say it's up to you how they're going to express themselves. You can either, if it's Pluto and it's transformational, you could either go with it or you could not go with it. So,
Hmm.
so you could go with the transformation. If you don't, when Pluto transits happen, you get hit 3 times. The second time will be worse.
Hmm.
And the third time will be worse. So Pluto can bring you to your knees. Same thing with Saturn, but with Saturn rewards hard work. So if you're having Uranus transits, that's sudden change. If you fight that sudden change, it may not get you this time, but the next time it hits one of your planets, it just gets worse. It ups the ante. And the other thing I want to say is that planets always have a positive expression and a challenging expression. And so you can say, I want to lean in toward the positive and not toward the challenge. So that could be it.
No, and I love that. And so that's important to understand because to your point, energy flows and we get to decide what the meaning of any, it's kind of, how can I put it? Words have definitions. And
Mm-hmm.
yet the meaning that we give to a definition makes a big difference in relation to where we're living in that moment. So it can
Mm-hmm.
either be a motivation to take mammoth action and to grow and move forward, or it could be repressive if that's the meaning that we give to something. And it also says a lot about our psychology and also about our heart set as to, are we living in faith? Are we living in motivation? Or are we living in judgment and trying to figure out, hey, is this who I really am? Because I know that you gave us the privilege today of having these amazing acknowledgments and about different sun signs and how people
Mm-hmm.
were living and how they were expressing themselves and the opportunities that could avail themselves if they were open to it. And then
Mm-hmm.
also some of the growth opportunities. I'm not even going to call them challenges because every challenge is literally a lesson or in growth. And I was like,
True.
gosh, that is so beautiful. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful because now the human condition is that we love choices.
Mm.
No one likes to be railroaded into a situation. No one likes to be told, just do this. Although some people need that kind of guidance, which is where someone of your skill set and gentle nature could help prod them and support them into I'll say a venue or a channel that serves them at a higher level.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, what do you love most about astrology, astronomy, and I will say being involved in this type of community, because you have such this beautiful, lovely soul to you, and I'm like dying to know what juices you, what just elevates you to another level.
Well, thank you. So what I want to say is that I grew up in a very religious household. I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and I rebelled at a very young age because I felt that it was a patriarchy
Hmm.
and that, it didn't work with me. And I have always been led by spirit, although I wouldn't call it spirit. I've had very strong inner guides that have
Yes.
said, no, don't turn that way. No, don't, like, danger Will Robinson, basically, or, you don't want to do that. But it wasn't until I actually, and I want to say that, like, people have said to me through my life, Iris, you are so lucky. But I believe we create our own luck,
Thank you.
right? I have a Sag moon, an Aquarius sun. I am an optimist. I have a grand trine in fire, and something bad happens. I'm like, okay, what can we look at that's good? I'm living in Southern California now, and it's been raining there quite a bit. And some people are really miserable, and they're like, another rainy day. And I look at it, well, at least there's not a drought.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm like, okay, like, where is the sunshine here? There's no drought, and there probably won't be one for a while now. So there's always a silver lining to everything. But
Yes.
I think the reason, I want to say two things happened. One is during the pandemic, and this is an interesting story. I did a reading for a gentleman, and this is October 2020. And I said to him, I looked at his chart and I said, you are beyond psychic. I said, do spirits come to you when you're asleep? And he said, yes. How do you know? And I said, I see it in your chart. And I said, have you had any training? And he's said, no, I have had no training. And I said, well, there's places you can go and get trained. And he explained to me that he started to drink a lot because the spirits were bothering him all night long. And I said, I don't know if that's an ideal situation for you. So I said, there's classes you can take. Close my computer. It's about 8:30 at night on the East Coast. I was in New York then. And I say, Iris, how do you know there's classes? Like, are you making stuff up? So I go back into my office, I get on the computer, and I look for these classes, and I find Lisa Williams. And I thought, oh, she looks very reputable. She has a school. So I sent an email off to him. This is the class I believe that would be good for you. Like, I spent about an hour and a half. Turn off my computer and I go to bed and I'm reading and I hear this voice that says, take that class. And I'm like, what do you mean take that class? And they said, and I hear the voice again, take that class. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a medium. I'm not a psychic. I don't need that class. I don't see spirits. So the voice kept getting louder and louder. And soon it was just screaming at me. Like, I had the pillow over my head. I had my fingers in my ear. This is all going in my head saying, take that class, take that class, take that. So I get up out of bed, and it wasn't an inexpensive class, and it was like a 9-month commitment. I
Right.
signed up for the class and I hit send at 11:57 p.m. This is important. And the next day, I have a friend who's a healer, and she always takes classes with me. I'm like, we're taking this class, sign up for it. I don't know why we're taking it, but we're taking it. I send her the link. And she calls me back and she says, registration closed at midnight. So I had the voice screaming at me to get me to sign before midnight. She
Wow.
could not take the class.
Wow.
So in Lisa's class is where I really connected with spirit and spirituality. Before, it was always just kind of, like guidance, I would say. But now I've connected that guidance with spirit and faith, and it's changed my life, and it's made me a lot happier. I mean, I moved to California because according to astrocartography, it's the third best place in the world for me to live. And I've known this my whole, like, since I've been an astrologer, but never wanted to move there. And like, people cannot believe what a wonderful life I have there. Everyone says how hard it is to meet people, when you get older. And I have so many friend groups there, like in a matter of months.
That's
So yeah, doing this work. And then the other thing is helping people.
yes.
In the past, I was in the real estate industry, which was helping people. I had an executive search firm that was helping people. And as an executive search person, I would make the fewest number of calls because I could hear someone's voice and I knew they were my hire. To me, that was spirit. Like, I would make a couple of calls and I'm like, okay, I got you. You're my hire. So I do believe that I've always been spirit led, but reluctant.
Mm, love that. And I have this belief about frequencies and that we all resonate at different frequencies. And when you really find those that are like-hearted, your frequencies are attuned, and it takes you out of just being like-minded.
Yes.
I love the variety of people's abilities to be able to manifest and to have discussion and to come up with great dialogue. But, well, let me rephrase that. Yes, and that there's this wonderful premise that when we share similar values, that there's this elevation, this co-elevation, because I'm not concerned that anything that you would ever say or proffer to me would be done out of malice. There's this connectivity, there's this respect of each other without judgment. And it's like, wow, that's so beautiful that we can have this community and commune together and collaborate. So I love everything that you just said as someone who grew up in Southern California when I was a kid. And so now we live in Dallas, Texas, and it's been a beautiful place to raise a family, which I don't know if it's my calling to stay here forever, but I can say that it's been wonderful as a father and as a husband to be able to be centralized to the country and to be able to travel pretty effortlessly to get to anywhere you need to be, at least in the continental United States. So, gosh, as a business executive, been in real estate, had a talent acquisition firm where you were actually, doing hires, and this concept that you just expressed of body, mind, and spirit, it's really real. It's the trifecta, isn't it? I mean, it's like, how can you find more peace or happiness or connectivity or congruency than to be living in all three of, if we want to call it, levels of life, and yet stay in flow. That's really interesting.
Well, life does that for you because life challenges you or challenges me to stay in flow because things will happen and you have choices you can make.
Yes.
I was recently in Kazakhstan, and as we got into the car to come back here, like I just psychically knew. I got in the car. I said, our plane's going to be delayed. I don't think we're going to make our next flight. And the driver, who was a friend of ours, said, we made friends with him over the trip, said, don't think that way. I go, I'm not thinking that way. I'm telling you what I'm feeling. And our flight was delayed 110 minutes. And we did miss our next flight. And we did get put up in a hotel. And, we could have been really upset about it. Or we could have just had a good time. Now, I chose to have a good time. So, but I could have been very angry because I had appointments, I had meetings that I had to, etc. So it's like life throws curveballs at you, and then you have to use your mind, body, and spirit to recover.
I couldn't agree more. And I know a lot of folks that use their body and mind, and it seems, I'm not judging, but it seems that they're lacking in spirit sometimes, where there's just, you're like, well, I have faith, I believe. And it's like, that's very different than hopium. I'm not a
Yes.
huge fan of that addictive state of living in hopium, hoping that everything's going to be all right, hoping that you might have financial freedom, hoping that you might be happy. I go, I prefer to believe that happiness is a matter of time, energy, focus, and attention, and that I get to allow myself to stay in flow. I was having a discussion yesterday, of all things, when we were in Houston with my nephew, and he was like, "Oh, Uncle Chuck, I just don't like it when I'm not in control." And I said, "That's all perception." And he goes, "Baloney." And I was like, "I got to call you out, buddy. Telling you." And he goes, "Example." I said, "The ocean. Do you control the waves? Do you control the tides?" I said, "You can look at astrological planetary bodies." I said, "The moon does control tides. It has gravity, it has pull." I said, "So there's physics that's involved with this. But when there's a storm, there's rogue waves. It's calm seas by comparison to rough seas." I said, "What do you get to contribute to the experience?" And he goes, "Well, you get to ride the wave." And I go, "Only if there's a wave. If it's flat calm, you're floating in a sea." "What?" He goes, "Salt water." I said, "What if it was energy? What if, as you're standing here or sitting next to me right now, you're living in this sea of energy, and yet you're dehydrated, you're energetically zapped, you are spiritually technical term." uh, and he was like, kind of going deep for spaghetti dinner, Uncle Chuck. And I was like, "Hey, you know what? Stuff happens over pasta. What can I tell you?" I'm curious for you and those, and I'm sure you have client privilege, those that you've interacted with, what have been some of your findings when you look at health and prosperity? Because you mentioned something earlier today to me, and this was beautiful too, because I've never heard of anyone bringing up biological or biochemical, when it comes to astrological readings. And it was like, that really impressed me, quite frankly. And the reason why I'm saying that is that awareness is key, preparation is important, and I'm someone who prides himself on health and vitality. And I've also found that in life, and I'd love to get your take on this, Iris. And this is my own hallucination, so I'll preface it this way: everything has a cost. There's a currency for everything. If it's time, money, energy, intention, focus, but there is a cost. And when you brought up energetic and body and have some things checked out, I was like going, okay, I'm going to do that, because that was unsolicited. And by the by, I get like checked out every 3 months. And as I'm a very active person, I've got a lot going on. And so if this goes, I don't know what else I have left. What would you say to someone when they're trying to figure out two things? One, belief. Like, and I don't mean to put this as a heavy burden on you, because as someone who was raised in a very Orthodox faith, I was raised Roman Catholic. I understand that those dogmas and tenets that come along with that. And yet there's also this ideology of justification by faith. It's like, I am bigger than just the definition that even my religion gives to me, that there's more to me than just X. For astrology, you have so many different reference points. What if someone says, "Oh, I'm agnostic and I don't have really a faith, and I'm just kind of floating in the ether"? And how would you explain the level of belief systems, or I'll just say even this, if we want to call it science, that's associated? Because there is a science to this as well. At least I believe that.
Oh, it's totally based on science.
Right. Thank
So-
you. Because I know there's some people going out there, okay, y'all are talking about suns and, rising. And I said, yes, we are. And there are different measurements and modalities. It's like, there's no difference in the temperature, except if you tell it to me in Celsius and I only understand Fahrenheit, we might have a slight gap in our interpretation as to what that really means as far as what the real temperature is, if that makes any sense. So
It does. So when when if someone tells me I'm not spiritual, I don't believe, I look at their chart, and based on their chart, I look at where they are in their life, because maybe, like, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything.
right.
But if it's a time of spiritual awakening, I might say, do you believe the sun's going to come up every day? And if I say yes, if they say yes, I'd say, well, that's faith. Do
Yes.
you believe that, that when you get out of bed, you're going to be able to walk, or that you're going to be able to speak in the morning? There's a certain level of faith to that. I
Yes.
also might ask them, um, do they ever feel like they're getting direction, or do they have an inner voice or an inner feeling? Because there's 5 different Claires. Some people eh, get like, I used to get a butterfly in my stomach when something was psychic, like when I was feel like I know this now, or I would get what I call a rush or goosebumps all over. I was talking about someone today where I think I said, "Oh, I'm like, my body is all goosies," and so I know that that is true. Sometimes people get like flashing words, or they may hear things or smell things that let them know things, or let them know something. Or maybe, someone's father always gave them a penny, and they find a penny on the street,
Mm.
right? Like, that is spirit, and that is spirituality to me. So I do believe, in general, my faith is that we are all spirit. We are all spirituality, and that we come from a place of all being one to this place where everything was love and light, and we've come to earth to experience that love and light in a physical form. And that's not easy for us, because we're all spiritual beings. So I can't say that I believe that there's one God. I believe that there's God within all of us.
Hmm.
And
Love that.
there's beauty within all of us. And all of us can't express that loving God all the time, nor are we meant to.
No, there are universal rules and causalities. It's like, I love what you said. It's one of the examples I was told about faith was, it's like, do you drive? And then people are like going, yes. And I go, are you concerned about perishing every time you're in the car? Because the only thing separating you from oncoming traffic is a double yellow line.
Yes.
It's like, okay, wait, oh, but no, there's rules. And I was like, oh, so there's the control thing again. I go,
Yeah.
is that not why sometimes people make decisions to do different things outside of the laws? I said, there's man-made laws, and then there's universal laws. If you're not growing, and then they go, well, then you're, and they go, well, dying. And I said, I'm not saying that you are, but I would say that that is an inclination that something might not be going the way that you thought it was supposed to be going. And so I love what you said about that, because now I believe it was Deepak Chopra that was talking about what we're made of. And he said, well, if you go back to chemistry, we're all made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. He goes, the building
Yes.
blocks of life, sprinkling some carbon in there, some oxygen, some other little, maybe a little iridium, and some other things that are in your body. It's like, oh, okay. And at the end of the day, that's a human being.
Yes, yes, it's true. I want to go back to something you were saying about control, because I am a very controlling person, and people would look at my chart like, I like things in order, very controlled. But I've realized that the more I give up the need for control, the more control I have in my life. So that example you used with your nephew, it's his choice whether or not he's in the water or not. That's control.
Exactly.
It's your choice whether you go left or go right. That
Yes.
is control in your life. But the more I go with spirit and ask spirit, like what is in my highest and best good, the more control I seem to have in my life. Now, I can't say I'm always perfect, but I try.
Well, and the human condition is such is that we're given the opportunity of lessons.
Yes.
And I am grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for the trials and tribulations and challenges. I've learned so much from experiencing those nuances of life that they have been the most influential shifts that I could have experienced without asking for them.
Yeah.
And so I know I was like, how do I phrase this? It is interesting now, though. One of my intentions in the morning, and I set the frame as to how I need to feel most often during
Mhm.
the course of a day. And
Mhm.
I pray, I ask the universe to bring people into my world that
Mhm.
challenge me to become a better person.
Mm.
And it's like, why wouldn't I? It's,
Beautiful.
well, I don't understand when people are just seeking comfort.
Mm.
And maybe it's my behavioral strategist mind. There's this ideology that I've always had that in comfort, it's a slow death. It's like, oh, I'm getting by. Everything's good. And I'm like going, really good? That's your benchmark standard for your life? It's like, well, what else is there? And I said, exhilaration,
Mhm.
enthusiasm,
Mhm.
anticipation. And
Mhm.
it's like, peace?
You know,
Hmm.
Chuck, I think that since you've achieved comfort, that, it's like you're up to the next level. Like the next level is how can I help people? How can I be of assistance? Plus, you're a Libra, and Libras are always looking for balance. You need people to balance yourself. And it's not that you want to be equal, the scales aren't always equal, but what you're doing is you're lending a helping hand to people that you could assist, which is a beautiful thing to do as a Libra.
Well, it's definitely been a calling. And when we created YBL, it was literally because we felt that there was a need in the world to be able to help collaborate with other beautiful souls and create a
Mhm.
community where people could thrive.
Mhm.
And I know that sounds a little woo woo for some people. And I will just say it has been the most liberating experience to be able to help support people in their journey in life and to bring literally souls together. I mean, these people are soulmates now. They're not just friends. They call on each other for everything. And it's like, it's no different than you and Lisa. It's like there's
Mhm.
this connection and it's spoken and unspoken.
Yeah. Yeah.
You,
I mean,
you can
Lisa
see it.
has this huge community. You're right. But just what you were telling me about what you all did in Rwanda, I mean, my heart just felt so full from that kind of work and I didn't even do it, but just you telling me about it.
Well, so this is how I feel when you start talking about folks about astrology.
Mhm.
I see all the possibilities, and it's like, ooh, you can see that there's compelling future for everyone,
Mm.
irrespective of where they're at astrologically, where they're at as far as the essence of what's going on in their universe. It's like we get to advance and grow. We get to have these options. We get to your beautiful point of you get to make decisions. You're not just this automaton and go right or left. You're like, well, I don't know. Straight looks pretty good too.
Yeah.
And
That's right. It's interesting because recently I did a reading for someone who she didn't lose her job, but she knew she was going to and went to the company and said, I can see the direction we're going in, got a package and needed to get a job by mid-June. And basically, I looked at her chart. I mean, it was just about where her future was going. And I said, well, an old company is going to make you an offer, but at the same time, out of nowhere, this other company is going to start pursuing you and it's going to be really good. Like it's just going to come out of nowhere. Well, an old company came back to her and made her an offer that was good enough. And I said, try to hold off till mid-June before signing the paperwork, because this other deal is going to come through. And she had to sign before June 1st. And anyway, now this other company is pursuing her hot and heavy. And I said, you know what, just interview with them, because you never know.
Yeah.
Maybe your next job will be this other company. But I knew by looking at her chart that she was going to get, and she hasn't gotten an offer yet, but I know it's going to be an insane offer and it's going to be difficult for her. And I think that's why she doesn't want to, interview with them.
You know,
So
it's a pain, and this is a concept too, the pain and pleasure principle. And we'll do more to avoid pain than we'll actually do to give ourselves pleasure. And I also have come to realize that people in the pursuit of security, and that in their mind's eye, not necessarily in their heart, but in their mind's eye, that if they've committed to something and it's a sound offer, that it's safe.
yes. And, truth be told, she's a single mom with 2 kids. And so, it's the security of her children that she's
Yes.
looking for. But at the same time, it's like, I'm a big risk taker, but I've been able to be a big risk taker. And I feel that, I know this other offer is going to be coming through if she goes for the interview, but she couldn't take the risk. And I understand that. And I do believe she's not going to end up staying at this current company. I'm just saying. I'm going on record. I did tell her that.
Which is great. And again, but that's the other side too, is when we're speaking truth, we need to give all of it. It's one of those scenarios where I was told this one time, and I believe this to my core. It's not what's said that creates the detriment. It's what is not said in the pursuit of trying to keep the peace that can actually create a war. And I was like, whoa, that's powerful. There are folks that go, well, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you tell me if this was what your gut was? And you're like, well, you seemed committed. Well, you seemed like you were all in. You seemed like you had made up your mind. I had, but you could have talked me out. Come on, Iris. You know you have that ability with me. And it's
what I say is, you didn't ask me. If you ask me, I will tell you frankly. But if you don't ask me, I am not going to poke my nose in your business.
Yes.
So if you want me to be a friend and just listen while you go through your twists and turns, or sometimes I'll say, do you want me to look at your chart if it's a friend? Or, I might do that. But typically, I find that if you get involved in something you're not asked to get involved with, it doesn't end up well.
There can be a kerfuffle at the highest level at that point, and people are like, okay, why'd you throw a monkey wrench into my perfect little universe where everything was good? I'd already said yes. So to your point, and I agree with you 1,000,000%. Permission is something that's really important. I
didn't ask permission one time in the 80s, and it was because I saw a dear friend had death aspects.
Oh.
And he was a gay male, and I said to him, you better wrap yourself up in a condom for the next 2 years, because I don't want you to die. And he said, I'm not going to see anyone for the next 2 years. And he ended up living, but he did go deaf in one ear. And so something died. So the planet had to, he had serious death aspects, and he was only like 29 years old.
Holy smokes.
But so he went deaf in one ear. So the planet did express himself. I gave him positive things to do, which he didn't do, like other things to have the planet express himself. But he did the main thing, which was to take care of himself physically. But it was interesting that something did die. But that was the only time I stuck my nose into someone's business where I wasn't invited.
Well, and there is this sense of social responsibility. It's we used to say this. I had the privilege of working with a lot of young adults, 14 to 17-year-olds. 20-year-olds. And the ideology that we constantly reiterated to people is if you see something, say something.
Yes.
And so to your point, there comes a prioritization of when you have an ability, when you have a skill in a craft. And I don't mean to coin a line in a movie, but with great gifts and talents comes great responsibility. And there are times when we are called upon to be the harbingers of a message that may not be as popular. And I will say in my life, thank goodness it hasn't happened too often, but there have been times where insight was paramount and you could see patterns very clearly that were occurring and made mention. And in one instances, it did not turn out so well as far as the friendship was concerned to be able to maintain it. And that's okay, because that person is alive and well. That person is living their life on their terms and growing and cultivating and healing. And I did not have to be privy to being an active participant in the maintenance of their lifestyle. We all get to make choices. And gosh, this is, I could go on forever with you. This is just so enlightening on so many different levels.
I do have a rule now, though. I don't give people information unless they ask, because I don't feel that it's ethical. So unless you ask me, I don't give you that information. Talking as a friend, I might, but I don't tap into my psychic ability when I do that. I'll just have a general conversation. Or I don't look at their astrology chart beforehand. Like, I had a friend whose father was sick, and she said, promise me you will never look at my father's chart, because I don't want to know when he's going to pass.
Right.
And she kept asking me, and I kept saying, no, I have not looked at, because you asked me not to.
Right.
I have not. And so I do think that people, when you have these abilities, people do need their privacy or need to feel like they're living life on their own terms.
That's actually beautifully stated. There's a level of accountability and ethics, and I'll say even a unspoken moral clause that we enter into when you choose to be in service to other people.
Yes.
And it's paramount that the sanctity of that space is honored. And I love what you said. I believe that when someone asks, then they've actually, irrespective of whether they know this consciously or not, they've actually given permission to know. And that level of inquisitive nature, I won't say it makes it easier for the message that's delivered, but it definitely puts them in a different state of how they're listening. It's more of an active listening, and they're very in tune. And they may follow up with additional questions at that point, which is also beautiful, because now at least there's continuity and communication.
Yes. And no one likes to be told what to do, especially unsolicited advice. So yeah, I tend not to do that.
I'm eager to find something out from you, as you have such a beautiful presence. Do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm an introvert.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting?
I had something happen to me recently that changed my core. And that is, I have a friend who's a healer. And we were doing a meditation. And during the meditation, I put my hand up for some reason. We were laying down, and I put my hand up, and she took my hand and cracked my heart open and took out all the pain from my heart. And we were both like, it wasn't just water was streaming down both of our faces. And I said to her psychically, you're not absorbing this, are you? And she said, no, look, it's going above my head. And then filled my heart with joy and love. And it's like totally changed my essence.
That is brilliant. There's so much deep-seated emotional energy that gets locked within us and is stored cellularly that I wish more people understood, that these protons, neutrons, and electrons have a frequency and a charge. When we've gone through life experiences, either real or perceived, and in addition to that, with enough emotional intensity that we can actually embed certain emotional states within us. And that's why people that get like deep body tissue massage, and then they go, I don't even know why I'm crying. Or
Right. It's
I don't
true.
know, like these colors came into my head, or I saw these images, or I heard these voices. And it's like those impressions have been imprinted. And so I love the fact that you said that you have been a highly operational introvert. And I've had people and they go, well, Chuck, you seem so outgoing. And I said, you don't know me.
Well, we are outgoing, but we need our alone time. I need time to myself every day or I get cranky, you know. Um, and I want to say after that event happened, people were coming up to me and saying, did you have a facelift? Like you seem so light, like your voice has changed, this has changed, that's changed. But I do believe that, that everyone has this ability to leave that pain behind and live in joy, you know?
And what you expressed, and again, this goes to who you are in your heart. You asked, you're not absorbing this, are you? Because I can say, as someone who has had the experiences of clearing energy, emotional energy with people, it became exhausting. And
Yeah.
I needed to go like purge, like I needed to go shower and, take a bath in Epsom salts, use cleansing soaps. And I'm not just saying to clean my pores, that literally clean my soul. It's like your energy, the heaviness and the weight, and sometimes experiencing someone else's pain. It's like my back was not hurting till we had this engagement, and then you're like going, ooh, where that
Exactly.
yes.
And this went on for an hour. The crying went on. The tears, like our shirts were wet, and every time I looked up, I could see the pain going above her head, like out. So
Yes.
yeah, I didn't want her to absorb my pain. Are you kidding?
No, no. And
She's got enough of her own.
it is interesting you say that. I did have one time that I was having an engagement with someone, and I asked him, I said, just let me have it. Because it was going to pass through me, but it was like, let me have it. They lived such a life of oppression that unless they trusted someone completely, they wouldn't release it. And that was a very interesting experience. I will say I felt lighter after the experience, and it was literally, I won't say channeling, I'll just say it was releasing. And it's been such a beautiful testament. Maybe that's why I feel so energetically connected to you, is there's this high, extreme high level of appreciation for the frequency that you constantly resonate at. And it's not something that you're actively trying to do, it's who you are.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, Iris, how do people find out more about you and how they can interact with you? Because we go out to 200 million households on this simulcast, and here's what's beautiful about this is that for some folks, they're having an exposure for the very first time, and I'm sure just from your energy and who you are and where you resonate at, there are people who would love to connect with you. How can they reach out to you?
Well, you can go to www.askirisLibby.com. You could email me at iris@askirisLibby.com. I'm also on Instagram and on TikTok as askirislibby.com. So you can find me in any of those places, and I'm happy to interact with you.
Oh, you're amazing. I'm so grateful for this time with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for blessing us with your presence and all the explanations and humoring me with some of my silly questions as well. Just know that we're grateful and appreciate you on so many different levels.
Thank you, Chuck. You're amazing. I love getting to know you. And I love your stories.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. I want to remind our viewers that this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check it out for all the news and all the programming. Spanish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thank you, Iris.
Thank you.